So greetings to all of you on CPD's 29th birthday, and we are now embarking on commemoration of 30 years of CPD. When I look around this room, I see that CPD as an organization is older than most of you. Who are the people? All of you who are younger than CPD, please put up your hands. Are baap re baap. Acha. So think of it. You are now joining an organization which is older than you are. And this gives you a sense of being a part of a historical process. Others like you have come, have worked, some have grown with CPD, others have moved on, and they have themselves made names for themselves in other organizations. One of the programs I will be suggesting to the ED for celebrating these 30 years is to actually invite all the CPD alumni who passed through here, who began their careers at CPD, and who have now grown up and become famous. Sanem Salim Rehman, his first job was at CPD. Abdul Razak, first job at CPD. Nazneen Ahmed, BIDS, a first job at CPD. So all these began their lives here and have grown with the organization and have now become well-known people. I can, of course, look back and see many people who I have seen grown with me. Actually, Mustafiz, I remember after he came back from Soviet Union, along with Devopriyo, along with Binayok, along with Tajul Islam, along with Nazrul Islam, they all joined with me in a research project at BIDS from aid dependence to self-reliance. This was my approach to bring in young people and to then encourage them to work on challenging subjects of that particular period. ওই সময় তো আমার CPD বাংলাদেশের aid dependence খুবই ভারী ছিল. So we wanted to see what could be done about this. So before my eyes and in my lifetime, I have seen people who are your age begin their careers and become famous personalities like Mustafiz. And this is what gives me the greatest pride, that one day I will not necessarily be around, though many of you may actually even do it much earlier. You too will rise to positions of eminence at some stage in your career. Important জিনিস হচ্ছে, as part of that process, একটা sense of commitment থাকতে হবে. You should never look at being in an organization where তোমার একটা চাকরি আছে. আমি চাকরি করে 9 to 5 আমি কাজ করে যাচ্ছি, এখানে বেতন পাচ্ছি, এইটা আমার জন্য যথেষ্ট. What was different for anyone who worked with me, first in BIDS and later in CPD, is that you were participating in a mission. You wanted to change things, for which তুমি যে কাজ করছো, that was the instrument to bring about change. So anyone who came here with the objective of just chakri was really of no interest to us, and they themselves did not serve their own purpose. The moment you see that you have a mission, then তোমার জীবনে এখন একটা meaning চলে আসছে. This is the important thing that you should keep in mind of what it was like to be in CPD. Now, why was CPD a missionary organization? This is what Mustafiz and Ronak have tried to give you some idea. ED has given you some thoughts on that. Let me give you my thoughts. You see, what has always been missing in Bangladesh for a very long time is a active civil society which has a voice. সব সরকারের voice ছিল ঐতিহাসিক, that it was the government's responsibility to make policy and to speak about it and to relate to it to the outside world. Civil society may write in the newspapers, maja maje, some organization will organize a program and they will then speak. Opposition was the voice of political society at that time, as long as there was an active and visible opposition. সব সময় তো ছিল না, because you went through periods of military rule, and at that time opposition's voice was limited. So at that stage, civil society read in the newspapers about what was going on, and different groups, economists, economic association or doctors association or engineers association, used it to spell out their own problems. BIDS was there always as a government-sponsored research organization, which was supposed to do research, usually of the sort which government was interested in. And they did very good work. They have a very long history, and I've been associated with that. But when I took over as the Director General of BIDS, what we set out to do was to make BIDS itself into a think tank. And the way we did this was that instead of just producing research, we began organizing a weekly BIDS dialogue, which took place every week to discuss some policy issues mostly related to BIDS research. But this was centered around BIDS, and mostly it reached out to researchers. When I was holding the dialogue, what I used to miss was that the main people who are affected by policies on which we are doing research, the political players, the ministers and government, the top business community, the workers, trade unions, the peasant organizations, they did not participate in that. We were really having academic discussions. তো এইটা আমার মাঝে I was thinking that এইটা একটা বড় অভাব আছে within the understanding of policy making, that how to bring all the people who are affected by government policy and official policy to come and express themselves. Are these policies good? Are these policies to be criticized? Are they missing out on important policy issues? When I was appointed a member of the first caretaker government, এখন তো people are having a conversation that caretaker কি জিনিস উনি বুঝে নাই, হ্যাঁ আচ্ছা ওইটা মিউজিয়ামে চলে গেছে, হ্যাঁ but আসলে যখন caretaker concept was conceived in the first instance, the most active proponent was naturally Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and the most active campaigning for it was her political party, the Awami League. তো উনি নিজেকে মিউজিয়ামে রাখতে চান নাকি I do not know, but they themselves were part of the process of bringing caretaker government. তো one important find, ওইটা তো 3 মাসের আমার tenure ছিল তো, and the responsibility of the first caretaker government was just to organize an election. Justice Shahabuddin ke khub kosto kore, we persuaded him to step down from being the Chief Justice to head the government. And uni amake instruction diyeche in the first meeting of the caretaker ki tumar kono kaam kaj nahi, tumi sob bekar log, বেকার হয়ে তুমি অফিসে বসে থাকো, এখন জাস্ট লেট আস ডু দি ইলেকশন অ্যান্ড আল্লাহর শুকর দিয়ে লেট আস গেট আউট অফ দিস এজ ফাস্ট এজ পসিবল। তো এটা আমার ম্যান্ডেট ছিল ওই সময়। But then, I suppose for some of you who know me, to ask me to sit quietly for 3 months, এইটা তো এখন আমার চরিত্রের বিরুদ্ধে চলে যায় তো। So I decided that how can I pass my time? And so I decided that last 10 years or 12 years of military rule, main policy makers of Bangladesh were not the government of Bangladesh, but were the aid donors. ওই aid dependence এর সময় সমস্ত policy guidance was coming from there. Most of the policies were being prepared by consultants, bharo beton pe, they were brought in here to do research. This was my big fight with the government from BIDS, that why, when you have BIDS here, are you bringing in consultants through aid to in fact do the work? And I told them that you have got a huge number of talented people to in fact do work for you. So when I was there for 3 months, I said, let me prove to Bangladesh people and its political leaders that they are talented and patriotic Bangladeshis who are willing to prepare policy advice for you. To be nutun democratic phase jatcho after 12 years of cantonment rule, and you should now reach out to Bengali experts to prepare policy advice. And so oikhane amar office boshe I reached out to, what is it, about 260 of the most talented Bangladeshi professionals of all disciplines and all political views, constituted them in 29 task forces on different policy issues, and asked them to prepare an agenda for pointing out the problems and giving policy solutions to the incoming democratic elected government. I told them that all the advice previously was coming in through aid money and through aid consultancies. আমি তোমাকে এক পয়সা দিতে পারবো না। I will expect you to work voluntarily, and the most you may expect is that you may get tea and biscuits whenever you come to attend any meeting. আর কিছু পাওয়া যায় না। And these people then worked day and night, and within about 2.5 months, they produced the most outstanding collection of policy recommendations in a series of 29 task forces. I don't know, ekhane ache naki those volumes. You will see in the library a series of red covered volumes which were the task force reports published by UPL. Mustafiz, Devapriyo, I think Fahmida, others were all members of those task forces at that time. And we got people with varying political views. Now, what will be of interest to you is that when I was setting this up, I was setting it up as a caretaker government member. I first went to Sheikh Hasina as the leader of the Awami League, and I said that I'm planning to set up these task forces. It was in a way probably illegal for me to do that, because I was not supposed to be interacting with any of the government people, any of the political people. And I said that this is what we plan to do. I hope that this will be of benefit to you. If you are elected, if you are not even as the leader of the opposition, it will be of benefit to you. And I want your blessings for this, which he readily gave and said that it is a kubi bhalo idea. Then through Mr. Saifur, the late Mr. Saifur Rehman, I went and met Begum Khaleda Zia and said that this is exactly what I want to do. You too should be aware of this, because I have spoken to Sheikh Hasina, and I want your blessings to go ahead with this. She also said that this is an excellent idea. I'm not sure she understood fully what is a task force. But anyway, I'm sure Saifur Rahman may have explained to her in more detail. And she then gave her full blessings to it. So these people worked, and miraculously, where nothing is produced on time, these people are. Oh, very good. Okay. There are 3 volumes here. There was one more special volume on environmental policy in a task force prepared by the late Mr. Dr. Fasiuddin Mehtab, which had a, because Unito, once he starts writing, unake to kono badha dewa jay nahi. In fact, the publication was being held up because he refused to stop writing. And we eventually had to bring his report out in a separate volume. So this was it. And I hope when you have time, you should come and visit the library and go through this to see the valuable work which was done, all because of the love of the country, out of a sense of patriotism, ki ami ekta nutun democratic phase hai, we are in fact making a commitment. Now, ekane bhi ekta itihas ache, which tells you something about problems you are facing in Bangladesh today. Agreement was then that we will present the reports not just to the chief advisor, but to the heads of the 2 main political parties. And we will do it in a big public ceremony. So once the reports were ready, I then got in touch with Sheikh Hasina. By that time, she had actually lost the election, much to everyone's surprise. And I said that anyway, you bring your full party high command to the Planning Commission, and in the auditorium, this will be presented to you. But the first presentation will naturally be made to Khaleda Zia, because she had been elected. So I phoned up Saifur Rahman and I spoke to him and said, this is the process. As the elected government, you will be presented the reports. With Khaleda Zia will be presented the reports with the full high command of the BNP. And then after that, it will be presented to Sheikh Hasina, because I have made commitment to both the leaders that it will be presented to you. Tarpor, on the night before the presentation was to take place, I get a phone call from Mr. Saifur Rahman that, Shono bhai, I have made a promise to you that we will be coming, but ekhon ekta condition chole asche. What is the condition? That you can only present the task force reports to the Khaleda Zia, because she is the elected representative. So I said, ki rokom kotha? I have made promises to both the leaders and I have to present it to both of them. She said, Tarpor, so we will not come, because unless you only present it to us. So this was the small-mindedness which I then began to discover existed in the minds of the newly elected democratic leaders. And so I had to then tell Hasina that that program is being... So I said, I will not just present it to you. Then he said, Acha, theek ache, then I will present it to nobody, only the chief advisor. So he said, theek ache, then after we are in office, you can then come and officially present it to us. So he said, fine. So this is what happened. This great event of the launch of democracy, with 29 reports being presented to both the chief elected government and the chief opposition party, was frustrated. We gave it to Shahabuddin. Then once these reports were published by UPL, then I told Saifur Rahman, acha, theek ache, now how about making a presentation? He said, now you can come. And so we presented it to the president. Then we presented it to the Prime Minister, She invited us. We had a ceremony. The the chairman of each of the task forces made presentations. Then we presented it to the speaker. And Khalida promised, we will give careful attention to it and so forth. Then I gave it to Sheikh Hasina. Now, Sheikh Hasina showed great interest in this. And even though she was the opposition leader, she told us that no, we must make full use of it. And what can we do? So I said, well, let it be presented in detail to all the members of parliament from your party. So she then issued orders to all the Awami League members of the parliament that for 3 days they will attend a series of full-day dialogues where each of the task force reports will be presented to them. And she also came to the first day. So Mustafiz and others may remember, like college students, they were all sitting in the Jatiyo Shongshad committee rooms, listening to the presentations, asking questions, and participating in the first, you may say, dialogues which were really held between politicians and technocrats. That was a very good experience, and she said, yes, we will make use of it in the parliament and so forth. But then what I discovered was that the BNP the ministers decided to put it on the shelves. I told them to call each of the task forces and to discuss it with them. And what had happened was that some people had gone and whispered in the ears of Khalida that Rehman Sobhan, as you know, is a great, very close to the Awami League. And all these task force reports were prepared only for the benefit of Sheikh Hasina. Now they are trying to pass on their policy advice to us. So you should not touch this. Right? So, as I said, Oshikito log, because no one bothers to actually read it. No one bothers to see that 3 or 4 ex-BNP ministers were chairing task forces. But kane fush kore jodi keu kichu bole dae, so that then becomes the truth. And of course, this was another reality I discovered at that time, that you may whisper things and that then becomes the basis of decision making without anyone wanting to do anything. So this meant that all these reports then were lying there without anyone using it. And I was thinking that all these fellows have put in so much hard labor. How should we present these issues and give them an audience? And so it was then that I said that there is a big missing gap in Bangladesh, that if interesting policy ideas are created, how can I create a space for this to be presented and discussed with all the key players? Because the point I wanted to establish is that policy making is too important to be left only to the government. It has to take in all the key people who are affected by policy or who have ideas to contribute. Professionals like all of you, politicians, the business community, the workers, the farmers, all of them have a stake in this policy, and even the donors. And so bring them around the table and then let us have a serious discussion on that basis. This was the essence of how CPD was born. When I thought of it, of course, I was not thinking that we will be one day sitting in a 7-storied building which we own, which will be CPD. ওই সময় the first CPD organization I set up, because আমার ambition খুব সীমিত ছিল. I wanted to have a small facility where I would then periodically bring 30 or 40 people around the table to discuss some of the major policy issues of the day, beginning with some of the main issues raised in the task forces. And so for that purpose, Eskerton Gardens, Goli je ache, we rented a small ground floor office from a landlady who used to live on top of us. Oi shomoy CPD consisted of myself, one administrative assistant, who we have not mentioned, Iftikhar Chowdhury, the son of the late Muzaffar Ahmad Chowdhury, the first Vice Chancellor of Dhaka University, independent Vice Bangladesh. Then we had Iqbal, who was the administrative assistant. We had Quddus, who came in as the word processor. We had Shoaib, who came in as the first peon, and we had the late Salam, because our first, when I look at your resources now, all I did was I wanted to buy the cheapest car on the market, and so we bought a non-air-conditioned Maruti as the only transport of CPD, which was driven by Salam. And I used to drive around in it, and they would, at that time, and people would say, what sort of chairman are you that you are roaming around in a car like this? So anyway, that was CPD, and in this small organization, we then began the dialogue process. Now, if you look at the first round of dialogues that we organized, the very first dialogue, ekonto amar founding date is on 16th of November, where the trust deed was started. How did we fund it? I said, let's not start with going to donors. So I went to Abed and said, this is what I want to do. Will you give me some support? So he said, yes, I agree. I wanted to raise about, what is it, about 50 lakhs or so. So he promised 20 lakhs in 2 installments, which he gave. Then Prushika also committed to give 20 lakhs, but he could only give part of it. Then Mahmood Hassan of GSM, he gave something. Then Khushi Kabir came in. She was there on our organization. She made a small commitment. So we raised, koto chilo in the first?
36, we counted, no?
36 lakhs. That is how we had our foundation. And it wasn't much of a problem because we were paying the rent of a small facility. And at that time, we had, as I said, this small Maruti car. I was not taking any remuneration at that time. And we had this small staff. And we then used to organize dialogues in the Shonargaon, in the small room, not in the big conference room, because my idea was that the dialogue should not go beyond 30 to 40 people, because oita limite moddhe you could have a serious discussion. But to test out the model, we organized a small dialogue in the middle of December. What was it? I think 23rd of December in Black conference, Choto conference room. We had a visit coming in from a professor of economics, a very famous person who had been a student of Tinbergen and who was the chief advisor of Jean Pronk, the aid minister who was wanting a new aid policy for the donors. And so we organized a discussion on new directions for aid policy in Bangladesh, where the first people who came in was the resident representative of the IMF, chief economist of the World Bank, resident representative of UNDP, and a number of secretaries. Moshiur Rehman was then Secretary of Railways and a number of other people. And I remember Devopriyo came to that as well. And this was the first dialogue. Then I prepared for it myself because I prepared a series of talking points. Generally, আলোচনায় মধ্যে হয় যা তা লোক কথা বলে যায় এখানে. So we said none of all that. 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the issues you need to address. I circulated to them and we had our first dialogue on that basis. And then once the model I found worked, then we began the public dialogues. And you will be surprised because this was the BNP period at that time. even though they continue to think of me as Awami Leaguer. In fact, I'll give you a small piece of history. At that time, when the first caretaker government was set up, the advisors were chosen by Shahabuddin asking the political leaders to give their nominations for people. And so they had three groups, the BNP, the Awami League, and the left group. So Sheikh Hasina and the left group both put me as on the top of their list as nominees, and my name went there. And so I was in Tokyo attending a meeting, I was called back. But then everything got held up. Why did it get held up? Because apparently the BNP said, Shobi Amar acceptable, but not Rehman Sobhan. Unake, uni to khub pro-Awami League log. So anyway, this became an issue. Eventually they agreed. So I remember meeting later on one of the ministers of Khaleda Zia, I think it was General Majidul Haq, who was their chief negotiator. And I said, I never wanted to be a member of this government. Why did you not argue more strongly against me? Why were you so weak in your argument that I had to be called back? He said, no, we respect you, but we know you to be the conscience keeper of the Awami League. So I said, I don't think the Awami League thinks of me as their conscience keeper. But Jai Hok, oi drishti chilo. And so on that account, they were thinking that this is not to be accepted. So when we set up the task forces, I was dealing with this mindset of the BNP. And so the first dialogue we held, I went to Saifur Rahman, and I said, I would like you to attend this dialogue as the chief guest. So he not only attended it, but 2 or 3 other BNP ministers came. Some of the AL leaders came. Mr. Saiduzzaman and other business leaders came. And Saifur Rahman had the distinction of then attending the first 4 CPD dialogues in person, even though he was the finance minister, and even though he knew that I was meant to be sympathetic to the Awami League. So this was the John. And what was established was that you could have really serious, intensive dialogues. At that time, the tradition of boycotting parliament had already begun by the Awami League. So the only place in which Mr. Kibriya or Mr. Mohit or those who were sympathetic to the Awami League could talk to the BNP was in the CPD dialogue. And here, no one was abusing the other person. They were all talking very reasonably. They were talking like intelligent human beings who could agree or disagree with issues. This was the first principle and tradition which was established in the CPD dialogue. And it was the one place in Bangladesh where you could bring all the contending groups together. In my entire experience, including in later years, only on 1 or 2 occasions have people really started shouting at each other. I think ek shomoy Mohiter matha gorom hoye gelo. Na? I forget whether it was with whom it was, I forget. Khurshid Anwar Eshonge. But beyond that, they became the same people who will be abusing each other in parliament were reasonable human beings in the CPD dialogue. And so this was the great contribution. And what we established then was that intelligent discussion leading to intelligent outcomes could come. Now, there were these 2 volumes of the first rounds of dialogues which were published. Both the issues we put on the table, how the discussion took place. And again, for those of you who are interested in a record of how policy thinking and debate was going on in the 90s, late 90s, please read that. It will be a real education for all of you for the thinking which used to take place at that time. Now let me conclude this very quickly. what changed everything was all this could be carried on with 4 or 5 staff members and a small office in Eskerton Gardens. What changed everything was, you may say, whether it was a wise decision or whether it was madness on my part. But my idea was, from my BIDS days, that you should not let donors dictate policy to you. Again, none of you will remember this because you were not born. Up to the publication of the IRBD in 1995, the main policy debates and the main policy presentations used to take place in an annual report published by the World Bank. It was known as the Country Economic Memorandum. It used to come out in a grey cover, so everyone used to talk about it as the grey cover report. And so if any Bangladeshi wanted to find out what was going on in the Bangladeshi economy, he would have to get the grey cover report. If any donor or any businessman or any consultant wanted to know, they got that report. And in BIDS, I found it very embarrassing that this should be there, but somehow I could never get the BIDS people to bring out an IRBD. Why, I don't know. I've got no good reason for this, because all the top economists of the country were then at BIDS. So in CPD then, without any staff members at all, I thought, why should I not revive the CPD? Why should I not start the IRBD? And I don't know what made me think of that, because amar to kono Mustafis, Devopriyo, none of them were at CPD at that time. They would come and help me in organizing dialogues and things like that. So without any resources, I first went and held discussions with what I call the like-minded dialogues, because we took a policy decision at that time that the two main aid givers who influenced policy at that time were the World Bank and the US government. And so the policy decision I took was that we will not accept any aid from those who have been major influences in policy making in Bangladesh. This was the policy decision I took at that time. And this is up to a point has remained, though I think in the changed circumstances I will not hold you to that policy any longer. But in those days we did it and we maintained it for many years. And so I reached what I call the like-minded donors. The Netherlands, Canada, Sweden, Denmark, UK was a small player in those days. But in those days, it was not very influential in policy making. And so I went to them and said that we will prepare this report, but you are not to tell me what to go do about this, what issues to cover. This is the precondition for this. We will define the agenda of the IRBD. And this will be the voice of civil society telling the government what the problems are and what our approach to policy making is. And so they agreed. And that was started in 1995. Now imagine, here I have taken on the commitment to produce an alternative document to the World Bank's grey cover report. Unar to puro Washington ekta South Asia division ache to prepare this. Local office ache, consultants ache. Ar amader kon sahoshe ami eta kaj niyechi? I kept asking myself, what is this madness? I could get Devopriyo. He then said Mustafis will come in as a virtually full-time resource. So he became, you may say, the director of research for that project. We had Razak, we had Sadim Rehan, and we had Anis. What was his name? Anis Rehman. They were the three first-class boys from Dhaka University who we brought in. This is the staff we had at our disposal. And then I went to BIDS and my colleagues and I said, what you could not do then, you have to do for me now. and that each of you will prepare chapters of your own expertise on agriculture, on environment, on industry. Devapriya prepared the report on industry, not for CPD, but as a staff member of BIDS. So this is how it was prepared. With Mustafiz there, and I had to work with him and edit the work and produce this work. It was not costless, because at the end of the first report, I managed to get 4 blockages in my arteries. And my first price, which I was paid, was to have heart surgery at the end of the publication of the report. So as I said, nothing in life is without cost. Keep that in mind. Anyway, the report came out, and then a lot of it was critical of government policy, but for 3 days, the reports were discussed in major dialogues in which virtually the entire BNP cabinet attended it. Major figures of the opposition, aid donors, all of them came. And all this was criticizing the government at that time about their policies. They were very unhappy. Ki eta unfair hocche, oita unfair hocche, eta thik nai. But they came and they participated in those dialogues. That was the reputation that we had already established. So on the strength of that, when I found that having one surgery was enough, aro ekta further round of surgeries would be perhaps too much, I then could persuade Devapriya to leave BIDS and to come in and to join us. And then we began the governance project, we began other projects, and this is how CPD began to grow. Then when I handed it over to Devapriya as the executive director, he was younger, more energetic, became more ambitious, moved, because before we left Eskerton, with the IRBD, with the governance project, from one small apartment, we expanded to 2 more apartments along Eskerton Road. So then Devapriya decided to move to this building in one building, and then the organization grew, became more institutionalized, became more ambitious in its research agenda. And as Mustafiz has pointed out, that is history. It grew with the organizations and became the most established think tank here. Now, tumi je logo dekhcho of CPD, I designed that logo. Now, this has become... and CPD, je ekhon lekha ache within the logo, this has now become a household word in CPD. If you go to Dinajpur, people may not remember what is Center for Policy Dialogue, but everyone will know that there is CPD. Ekta jaga ache oikene, in which aluchona cholche, সরকার অপছন্দ করে মাঝে মাঝে পার্লামেন্টের রাগ করে ওটা উপরে, but they know what is CPD. So think of that. That is really what has come out of this tradition. And so all of you, if you go there, you do not have to produce any calling card. You can just say, I'm from CPD, and তোমার পরিচয় হয়ে যাবে এখানে. I presume that you have tested that out whenever you go anywhere. Now, this is a remarkable thing, I may say, because it has shown that an organization created with very few resources, without a regular flow of funds, again, taking positions which are critical of every government of the day, it is not that we only criticize, we say many good things, has survived for 30 years and has continued to carry on that tradition. And this has basically set the tradition for other think tanks to emerge. When CPD came out, এটা কোনো tradition ছিল না, এটা বুঝতে হবে all of you, that we were the first to demonstrate that civil society has a voice and they can then address the major issues of the day, they can challenge the government, they can bring government to the table They can get them together with the opposition. Now, other organizations began coming up, and today you will find that every day some organization is holding a function. But we were the first to put a think tank's dialogue on the front page of the newspapers and as lead stories on television. This was when CPD personalities became public figures. Devopriyo became, you may say, one of the first talk show artists. He used to wear these braces like Larry King. And with the logo of CPD, he became a public figure. Gradually, others, Mustafiz and their successors, now Muazzam, now Fahmida, all of you have become public figures with the CPD logo behind you on this. And this is what we have established. The main tradition is that we continue, and we have had imitators now in large numbers emerging. So the tradition of civil society and think tanks becoming a major player in the game and being noticed in public positions has been established. Now, when I go to India, when I go to other countries, when I go abroad, I don't read in any newspaper that this think tank or that think tank has organized a policy dialogue which is getting a newspaper headline or a first lead story. I do not read in any newspaper that Prime Minister Modi or Dr. Manmohan Singh is taking objection to what CPR in Delhi has said about criticizing government policy. But that in Bangladesh, Prime Minister of Bangladesh and Finance Minister and members of Parliament should spend half a day discussing CPD comments on what they have said. I know of no second country, certainly in South Asia and possibly anywhere in the world, where this happens. But because the tradition that civil society voices should be heard has been established through CPD, this is happening. Now, every day you pick up the papers. Today, you will see that 6 economists from 4 different think tanks are being cited about the so-called current economic crisis in Bangladesh. You will every night see Mustafiz or Muazzam commenting on this subject. Now, what is the situation? It means that that civil society has got a voice, and that we have established that tradition that civil society voices count. So it is a noble tradition. It depends on your loyalty, your commitment, above all, your sense of unity and your sense of cohesion as a member of one family to maintain this tradition. It is a proud tradition, and you should keep it up. Ami amar 3rd volume of memoirs likchi, in which I have given several chapters to the CPD story. Because not only did CPD then establish itself as a Bangladeshi think tank, but we reached out to Indo-Bangladesh dialogues. We were the first to organize Indo-Bangladesh dialogues, again in the BNP period, where even talking to India was seen as a subversive act at that time. But we took on this tradition of organizing dialogues. South Asia cooperation. We were the hosts and founders of the South Asia Center for Policy Studies. And finally, we were the first organizers of the Kunming initiative, reaching out to China. So, pratyek area te CPD has been the pioneering organization, national, bilateral, regional, and then beyond the region, Asia, at that level. This has been there, and once you start it, others will follow you. Eta to ekta normal jinish ekhane ache. So, I hope that this tradition can be continued. I didn't expect to necessarily survive so long. I like to thank those of my partners from the very beginning, and right down to today, who have participated in this journey and taken it to the heights that we have taken it. They will always be embedded in my memory, and I will project their names as I have done in my memoir for the contributions they have made. But the final measure of whatever achievement you have started is its continuity. That leaders start things, but they don't always finish it. And it lasts as long as the leader is there. The real measure of leadership in a successful organization is continuity. And that succession can take place in an orderly way, and it can go on taking place. That is what is known as institutionalization. So this is a tradition which must be continued, and the final measure of an organization is that when you people become mature members and senior research associates and research directors, you will still be running CPD. A succession will be continuing in CPD in the best tradition, and you will be able to say with pride that we began when this organization was 30 years old. We are here when it is 40 years old, and even when it is 50 years old. That will be then the great achievement that we have achieved. So, sorry for talking for so long, but I thought I should get this off my chest. Over the next year, I hope a series of programs can be organized to commemorate this. One of the projects which I had started with Fahmida, who was our dialogue queen, with Fatima Yusuf, our dialogue queen at that time, was to create a volume of all the photographs of CPD dialogues beginning from 1994 down to the present. And you will see people who were, how they looked when in 1994. You will see people with hair on their head. You will see people with black hair, which is now turned white, grow up with CPD in those photographs. And from that you will get a sense of how CPD evolved as part of the history of Bangladesh. That will be the interesting challenge for you. So I hope, Hamida, you will take this project to its conclusion, and by the time you actually commemorate the birthday of CPD next year, you will be able to present this volume to everyone who actually comes here. But there will be many other ways in which to commemorate CPD. We will discuss this, and we will then find other ways in which we will get you to all play your part. But thank you again for listening to me, and remember the tradition and carry it on. Thank you.